"Mr. Parks, you have two choices. You can serve 5 years in a state penitentiary for drug trafficking, or you can give me 3 months in a strict military-style boot camp. What's it gonna be?" For 27-year-old Kenny Parks, the math seemed simple. 60 months behind bars, or 90 days of yelling and push-ups. It was his first felony. He thought he could outsmart the system. He made a split-second decision. He thought it was a shortcut to freedom. He was dead wrong. The 90-day trap. Back in the mid-1990s, Kenny lived in a mid-sized city. On paper, he was just a regular guy, floating between factory shifts and fast food counters. But Kenny had a side hustle. He was running a small-time drug operation. Honestly, it wasn't even costing him anything to run. Kenny's main supplier had a very specific, eccentric business model. He would hand out free product, designer clothes, and expensive sneakers to his runners. The catch? You just had to play along with his games. This included a bit of same-sex flirting whenever the supplier felt like it. Kenny didn't mind playing the game to keep his pockets full. He thought he was a hustler. He thought he was untouchable. But his personal life and the local police were about to complicate things. While Kenny was juggling his illicit side business, his love life was an absolute circus. One night, a friend dared him to walk into a local LGBTQ nightclub. He had tried to take a woman home. Kenny, never one to back down from a challenge, accepted. That's where he met Flo and Nora. Nora was soft-spoken and incredibly shy. Flo, on the other hand, was the dominant personality. What started as a dare turned into a complicated, ongoing arrangement. After a dozen secret encounters, the unexpected happened. Flo got pregnant with Kenny's child. But as the pregnancy progressed, Flo grew distant. Hormones, relationship drama with Nora, and her own career took priority. This left Kenny out in the cold. With his relationship souring, Kenny poured his energy back into the streets. What he didn't know was that the eye in the sky was watching him. Law enforcement had been building a case against him for months. One afternoon, Kenny completed a routine transaction and started walking away. Right on cue, an old neighborhood friend named John pulled up in his car. "Hey man, need a lift?" John asked. Kenny hopped in. It was the worst mistake of his life. 5 minutes down the road, the rearview mirror lit up like a Christmas tree. Red and blue lights. Multiple squad cars. They weren't pulling John over for speeding. They were there for Kenny. The police dragged them out. Kenny quickly realized he was the main target. But things went from bad to worse during the search. It turned out John's car was loaded with drugs. There was far more product in the trunk than what Kenny had on his person, and he knew he was in deep trouble. In the chaos of the search, Kenny panicked. An officer didn't hesitate. He hit Kenny square in the face with a blast of pepper spray. Because they were in the same vehicle, every ounce was pinned on Kenny. He was slapped with heavy drug trafficking charges. He was booked, processed, and thrown into a cold jail cell where the reality of his choices finally set in. Naturally, Kenny lost his factory job. A missing paycheck was the least of his worries. He sat behind bars. His cell was cold and dark. When his day in court arrived, the prosecution laid out an ironclad case. They had high-definition surveillance video. They had marked bills. And worst of all, Kenny realized he had been serving a snitch. That brings us back to the judge's offer. 5 years in prison, or 3 months in a military boot camp. Kenny chose the boot camp, and at first it almost seemed like it was. Kenny was physically fit. The forced running and intense calisthenics didn't break him. While the other inmates were crying and collapsing, Kenny coasted through. He stood out like a sore thumb. He was completely unfazed by the drill sergeants. He thought he had beaten the system. Then came graduation day. Graduation day was supposed to be Kenny's ticket home. The families arrived. But Kenny's guest list was unique. First, one of his friends rolled up in a flashy Cadillac. He was visibly tipsy and blasting loud rap music. Then came his other guests, Flo, his lesbian baby mama. She carried their daughter in a baby carrier. The boot camp leadership watched this chaotic scene unfold. They looked at Kenny's arrogant attitude. They realized this program hadn't changed Kenny at all. He still had the same mindset. When the ceremony ended, everyone was handed release papers, except Kenny. Mr. Parks, step out of line. The leadership recommended an extension. The judge agreed that Kenny hadn't learned his lesson. He tacked on another 3 months of hard labor. Kenny watched his family drive away. He was marched right back to the barracks. 3 months later, Kenny's second graduation arrived. This time, he invited absolutely no one. He walked out of the gates alone, quiet, and finally humbled. But the story doesn't end there. A few months later, Kenny was catching up on the local news. He saw a familiar face on the screen. It was the hard-nosed, terrifying sergeant. He ran the entire boot camp program. He preached discipline, law, and order. As it turned out, the sergeant had been arrested and indicted. He was involved in illegal sexual encounters with female inmates. The very man who extended Kenny's sentence was going to federal prison. In the end, Kenny got his freedom, and the man who locked him up took his place behind bars.